Okay.
We're up here at the Fane Hute in Italy, in the middle of the Dolomites, looking at the new Dynafit Beast alpine touring freeride binding. The intention of this binding is that it's a frameless tech style binding with the tech fittings for the boot and so forth, but constructed and made in such a way that you could use it for skiing just as you would use an alpine binding, perhaps for a freeride comp even, or even some form of ski racing. The idea that it has the full performance of an alpine binding, but with the tech fittings for the boot. The boot goes in the binding. Well, let me back up for a minute. The way it works is the toe pins are mounted on a rotating platform. It rotates like this, and that's what it allows you to effectuate the release, rather than the normal tech fitting style of the pin mounts opening up. The release is locked out, just as with any other tech binding. There is a release lockout. You flip this lever, and then it can't rotate. So that's a pretty simple concept. To get in and out of the toe, it's just like any other tech binding. There's a thing you press down on that opens up the wings, and then you can get the boot out. When you put the boot in, they snap closed on it. Where I think more of the engineering magic happens is in the heel unit. They've made the pins and so forth to where the heel pins actually, as well as the pins bending in a spring fashion as with any other tech binding, the pins actually move up and to the side when you do a vertical release at the heel, when the heel comes up in a release. And that gives the binding a lot more elasticity. I'm not sure how many degrees. We'll find that out when we test it ourselves. But the theory being, again, that this is going to behave much more like a full-on alpine binding. In fact, you could call it, if it works as engineered and designed, it'll work as a full-on alpine binding. You will not need any other bindings. It's possibly the one quiver binding. All right, so to get the boot in, similar to other tech bindings, Dynafit bindings, you're going to line up the pins. Now we're in. Now, if we're touring, this is the lock, so it won't rotate. And then here's the heel lifts. It's ingenious the way this works with the lower or upper heel lift. When you're ready to tour, you flip it down and then you step, and that moves the binding heel back and folds the brake up. So that's all with one motion when you're ready to tour, which is incredibly ingenious in my opinion. Okay, now it's in tour mode. Downside is we do not have a heel flat on ski mode. So, everything's a compromise with this type of engineering, and that's one thing I can see right away, that for the hardcore ski tourer, it's going to be a little bit of a detriment to not be able to get your heel flat on the ski when you've got long sections of lower angle walking. So, but that's not the real intent of this binding, is to act as a full-on alpine binding and freeride binding, so they have to make a few compromises. At any rate, when you want to get out of the binding, again, you're going to press down on the actuator here that opens the wings up and allows you to get out. All right, so that's the touring modes. Let's say we're going to freeride. Whoop. Let's see. Okay, yeah, that's going to be up. All right, we'll get the toe in. Bam. And leaving the binding, remember it's locked when this is down, which one would have to get in the habit of which is which. At any rate, so you're going to step down in, and as you can see, the system requires a beefed up heel fitting as well, which is a pretty impressive piece of equipment. that they've got going on here. This apparently is retrofittable to other boots that have a very nicely shaped din heel, but the din standard for the shape of a boot heel is not particularly precise. It allows some fudge factor, so retrofitting this on other boots might be difficult. At any rate, Dynafit will have this on all their, on all their free ride boots, maybe on all of them for all I know. So at any rate, step in, and another cool thing about this is the force for the step in is independent of the binding release setting. So you can set the binding to the maximum of din or release value 16. We don't like to use the word din yet because it's not din certified, but we can set the binding to release value 16, and the step in force is still only 4 release value. So super easy to step in. I'm barely putting any weight. And it, as you can see, it pushes these funny looking things, allow the release to happen. Now we're in full on downhill ski mode, although one would have to remember to flip this up, otherwise you don't have any side release. But when it releases, this rotates, and the idea is you've got an incredible amount of let's go finish the release. So it's going to rotate and then pop out like any other tech binding. Let's see, a little hard to make that happen by hand, but you get the idea. Okay, so let me go down. Let's put the boot in again as if we're going to ski. So I'm going to push down. As you can see, the fitting works against these funny looking metal angled wings here, and that's what actuates things and allows the boot to go down very easily and nicely. So bam, we're in, and then it's hard to demonstrate, but if you were going to do a vertical release at the heel, as well as the pins spreading like a normal tech binding and so forth, everything actually moves in here and allows you to have a lot of elasticity to the binding, which is really nice. So let's see, anything else I need to mention? That's really the concept. If you're, one thing you would have to remember is you've got a locked mode and an unlocked mode. So if you were extreme skiing and you wanted to lock out the release, it's still pretty cool because you've got that old tech binding wonderful thing that Fritz Bartle invented so many years ago, where you can just lock the binding and then it doesn't have any, it won't release side to the side, and then where you'd normally have it is with safety release, so it'll come out and you're out. So, and then one thing to note as well is the amazing amount of elasticity in the heel unit. And that's of course where all the lateral release, sideways release, elasticity and power and force and all that are incorporated into this heel unit. So just like a conventional tech binding, though, smoother and with a wider range, and also less play, because the components are a little larger, which in engineering allows you to make components that mesh together with less play. And you can feel like a normal tech binding will always have a little bit of a movement in the heel unit, and this has very little, noticeably less. And then, as I mentioned, when the binding releases vertically, the pins and the binding actually move and allow some elasticity, and that's why they have this spring that allows that, more than just these pins, which on a tech binding the pins provide everything. So a normal tech binding such as a Dynafit has a much more limited amount of elasticity for vertical release. And then, as with other Dynafit bindings, there's a spring barrel here, which is your lateral release adjustment, and then vertical releases. is adjusted there, and then it has quite a long range of boot length adjustment, which is adjusted there just as other tech bindings are. Another thing to note is that along with the whole free ride concept, instead of the heel post resting on the ski top skin, they have it integrated into the plate, so that it's hooked on the plate here, and then the screws hold the plate to the ski. So even that is more of a conventional alpine binding style of putting a binding on a ski. Well, that's about it. Very interesting, I think, for a certain group of people who need beefy bindings and want something that's maybe even one binding that'll do everything. This is, I think, a wonderful addition to what's available out there. This is wildsnow.com.